Two sisters separated by war, two brothers separated by hate. So begins the story of Kat and Lucy, princesses of Arbenad, and Thomas and Eric, princes of Erlingue. Kat, ever the tomboy, is caught in the midst of the battle and made captive by Prince Eric of Erlingue. Lucy escapes capture by fleeing off the mainland and finding safety in the crumbling island kingdom of Everseen. She is welcomed by Queen Aralea and Prince Marcus, but her new life quickly becomes chaotic as Everseen is plunged into civil war. Meanwhile, Prince Thomas of Erlingue desires to be king, but as second-born to the throne, his wish is denied as he jealously watches his brother Eric take the throne and continue their father's war on the free peoples of the world. Through a series of events, Prince Thomas, Kat, and Lucy team up, seeking sinister King Eric's ultimate demise, but Eric is working for a darker power. Who will win in the end? Okay, the Heir is a, I want to say low fantasy, medieval style novel with whole bunches of adventure and such thrown in. It follows Princess Kat and Princess Lucy from Arbenad, who are suddenly plunged into war with Erlingue, led by Eric, who is soon to be king and then becomes king, and things go very badly. So Kat gets captured, Lucy flees the country. Yeah, it's bad. Thomas, Eric's brother, sees the problems and tries to do something about it, and then things kind of fall apart from there. So this story is kind of, I don't know, it kind of borders dark fantasy with sort of noble bright intentions. I mean, the things that happen are not terribly nice. The characters, though, excepting Eric, who from the description you can tell is not a great guy, they feel more like noble bright characters. I mean, they have some problematic tendencies, but most of the time their intentions are pure, they're in trying to do the right thing, etc., etc. So it kind of borders that line. Now, as far as the story goes, the description makes it sound like there's a lot going on all at once, and there is, but it makes sense when you're reading the story because the events follow very naturally, the characters move things forward as you would expect them to, and it does make sense in the context. So the description, I think, is probably a little bit misleading because it sounds like things are chaotic, and they are, but not in the way that you think. Everything makes sense. I think the story follows pretty well. I think my only complaint with the story is that the ending bit where the confrontation with Eric occurs, and I can't tell you any more than that because of spoilers, I think that happened perhaps a little too swiftly and without as much difficulty as I would have expected. I think it works, though, frankly. Anyways, so the story is pretty good. The characters I like, except for Thomas. Eric is very stereotypically not a great guy, but I get it. It makes sense. Kat, I think, is very interesting, and Lucy, I think, is probably my favorite out of all of them because she seems to have the most complex thought process and situation and whatnot. But Thomas, I kind of don't like him very much. I mean, okay, compared to the villain, he's really a great guy, but especially at the beginning, his attitude towards his brother is very one-dimensional, and he's like, yeah, I really don't like this guy, and I want to be king, and I should be king, but he never actually seems to say things or do things until he's backed into a corner and has to make something happen. And I get that. It's actually a fairly realistic character trait. With all of the things going on in the world, in this book, I just want him to be a little bit more proactive. Just, you can do it. Oh well. I think he's just fine. I think the character's all pretty good. I think my main critique with this is probably to do with the prose. Now, the story follows very nicely, the characters are very well explained, but the prose has a lot of narrative description. You know, this person felt X because why a situation had happened in the past, and it's not the stereotypical showing versus telling thing. I feel like there's a lot more narrative description than action, than conversations, and I wanted a little bit more maybe character interactions with each other rather than the world inside their heads, or being told to us. It's not really that big of a deal. I think it works pretty well, and especially once you get probably a third into the story, I think the prose picks up a fair bit and is far more interesting. But it took me a bit to get into, okay, we're being told a story as opposed to seeing the characters play out a story. Now, again, this is not your stereotypical showing versus telling situation. I just don't have another word for it besides being told a story. It took me a minute. It's not a style that I come across often. It does happen. It's actually not unheard of, and I have read a fair number of stories that have this, but I haven't seen it in a bit, and it always takes me a minute to get into the prose. On the whole, though, I think this story worked pretty well. I liked it. I think the situations that the characters ended up in were very interesting. They were probably very dramatic compared with my normal boring reading books and writing books life, but for the world I think it makes perfect sense. I think that everything was logically thought out, logically well done. The characters were pretty good, except for Thomas at the beginning of the story, but he got better. He did. I promise he gets better. And even the ending, while being dramatic and ever so slightly cliffhangery, because it suggested that more things might happen, I think the ending worked out very well, and it was nice to see. So yeah, on the whole, I think this was a pretty good book. If you're interested in fantasy adventures, there's not a huge amount of magic. I mean, there's a little bit. Very little bit. But most of it is to do with, like, historical world / historical situations, but in a fantasy realm, etc. There's a proper word for it, I just can't remember what the word is. So yeah, low fantasy setting is probably the most accurate way to describe it. If you're interested in that sort of thing, this is worth a read. As usual, all of the links are in the description box below. You can find them there. You can find my links there too. But you may have noticed there's a new book on my shelf. I'm very excited about this. Yes, if you want, you can find that there as well. Otherwise, it is March, which is weird because it feels like yesterday was January. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what to do with that. But that's all I've got for you today. And so I say, go cause some trouble, enjoy whatever world, weather, things are happening in your situation. I mean, you either got spring coming or you've got autumn coming, and either one is nice. So go out, enjoy the weather, and cause a little bit of trouble, read a book, and I shall see you next time. Bye.